Welcome to the second video in this spicy range on the Belgrade Gambit. So if you watch the previous video, if you watch this video, you've got everything you need to go and play this exciting gambit line. So the Belgrade Gambit occurs after e4, and now black plays e5, knight to f3, knight to c6, and now we enter into what is called the four knights position, and that's with knight to c3. Now, I expect everyone has seen the move bishop to b5 here, which is the typical Spanish move, Ruy Lopez move. Now, in my opinion, the problem with playing this is that there's lots of theory to learn. You really have to basically memorize a number of books, which can't be so much fun. I don't want to memorize books. And also, you might face the boring Berlin defense. So the move I prefer here is knight to c3 with some very aggressive ideas in mind. Now, if we first look at the Belgrade Gambit, then we'll come back to other options that black can try here. So the Belgrade Gambit is with knight to f6, which I think you'll face most of the time, and now d4, opening up the center of the board. And here, what can black play? Well, black really has to take on d4. I don't think there's any other moves worth considering. And the Belgrade Gambit is with knight to d5, this brave knight jump into the center of the board. Now, hopefully you watched the previous video and we covered the main move there, knight takes e4, where white has a number of exciting options, but the simple bishop to d3 gives a very good attacking position. Now, what else can black play here? So let's think about this logically. Well, as white, you're really just trying to take back this pawn on d4 at some stage, and maybe also develop with your bishop to g5, develop, attack, attack, attack. Your bishop on f1, where should that go? Well, either to d3 or to c4, both aggressive squares. Now, the main moves for black here include bishop to e7, which is a very solid way for black to play. I don't think it's particularly great. Knight takes d5, which has been played probably the most often, so we'll have a look at that. And then the final move, which I think is actually black's best defensive try, the very bizarre counter knight jump, knight to b4. So you really need to know what to do against each of these three possibilities black can play. So let's have a look. Well, bishop to e7 is a very solid choice, but I think white should have a nice safe advantage and keep attacking, because that's what we want to do. We want to keep rocking and rolling, keep attacking, keep the pressure on our opponents by simply playing knight takes d4. And our knights are very aggressively placed now, with the knight on d4 having two options where it's going to go next. It will either go to b5 or to f5. For example, here, if black gets greedy and now takes on e4, well, this is a very bad move because our knight on d4 can cause some chaos by jumping to b5. And there's no good way for black to stop an absolute disaster occurring on c7 there. So it'd be very greedy for black to grab that pawn. What else can black play? Well, if black castles here, trying to go for quick development, I'd recommend the new move here, knight to f5. And this looks very dangerous. Look at those knights increasing the pressure on black's position. And one of the points is, if knight takes e4, well, we can fly the major piece into the game, queen to g4, threatening checkmate and the capture of the black knight. What else can black do here? Well, there's not really many good moves, because if he goes knight takes d5, we capture with our pawn and we're attacking the knight. In the worst case here, we can simply take the bishop next move, castle our king, and we have the advantage of the two bishops and a very advanced d-pawn. So again, this is a variation that should not scare us. So let's just go back and have a look at this again so we can reinforce the ideas you should be playing. So bishop to e7, what do you play here? You simply grab that pawn on d4 back. Now black in this position, probably his best move is to take on d5. And after this, we recapture. And after some trades, I would say white has a very small advantage here. You want to go bishop to e2, castle your king. In this variation, the bishop comes to e2 just to stop any annoying checks that might occur to your king on the e file. And we have this advanced d pawn giving us a figurehead to attack with and a slightly better position. So this is a nice sort of safe way but still aggressive way to play for white. And we're just going to cover all possibilities so you don't get tricked out. So really, that's after bishop to e7, that's all you need to know. You simply take the pawn back on d4 and attack. Put your knight on f5 if you get a chance, castle. So don't worry about bishop to e7. Now, what about this move, knight takes d5? Well, I don't think this is a particularly great move here. And what you should play, as always, is go pawn takes d5. And now the black knight has to move to a misplaced square. If the knight moves back to e7, black is creating this coffin around his king. And that king is really suffocating on e8 there. And after a simple move like queen takes d4, how can black get castled? It's a very bad position. And we're going to simply move our bishop, get castled, and as in the previous video, put our rook on e1, attack, attack, attack. So black should probably try knight to b4 here. And just be careful that you do not play queen takes d4. That's the kind of move that if you played in a game, you'd have to go and have a little cry in the corner of the room when your opponent plays knight takes c2 check. That is embarrassing. We've all done it. We've all had a little cry at some stage in our chess lives, some more than others. I know that for a fact because I tend to cry quite a lot, you know, when I play moves like this. Not so much anymore, thankfully, but that's a crying move. Don't avoid that one. Just don't fall for something like that. So instead, what should we do? Well, you have the safe option here of defending your pawn on d5. When, again, you can castle quickly, get your rook to e1. This looks very good. And even knight takes d4 looks nice. Okay, you're gambiting the pawn, but this is called the Belgrade Gambit, so you have to be up for a spicy challenge here. And if knight takes d5, we can go bishop to c4, attack, attack, attack. And we're going to castle, get a rook to e1, check, attack, attack, attack. And this is a very attractive position for white with big attack coming. So black shouldn't really, after this brave Belgrade knight jump, knight to d5, capture on d5. And this really only leaves one option, and this is black's best option. Knight to b4. And I have to be honest, I don't believe that many people will play this move, knight to b4, because it looks kind of ridiculous. Why move a knight again? Why move it to b4? It's kind of anti-opening, anti-foundations. And here, well, white has a number of moves. The line I suggest you play here is to simply take on f6 check, queen takes f6, and now develop with speed. Bishop to c4. And before I recapture this pawn, it's worth pointing out again, there's another crying move here. If you play knight takes d4, black has a typical trick here. And this is a trick that you should really know. Black to play and to win material. Can you see the trick? Pause the video if you need to. Queen takes d4. And you would shed a little tear after recapturing the queen. Yes, you've won a queen temporarily, but then this big fork, knight to c2 check, winning the queen back. Black will be a piece up, piece and a pawn up even, and you have a lost position. So do not be in a rush to recapture this pawn on d4. The best way to play is to develop, castle your king, maybe even try ideas with e5, bishop g5, attack that exposed king. And only when the timing's right, win the pawn back on d4. For example here, bishop to c4, and now some line with maybe d6. And now I like this little safety first move because, again, you might know from my last video, we always have to consider what our opponent's trying to do. And here our opponent, after his move d6, is freeing the bishop on c8. And that bishop would love to fly into the game on g4. So let's stop that plan. h3, and now if black plays a move like knight to c6, trying to guard his pawn. I suggest we castle, bishop e7. And now let's bring our pieces out with attacking ideas. How can you bring your last piece out? This is the only piece we need to bring into the game. Bishop to g5, good attacking move. And after something like queen g6, bishop takes bishop, knight takes bishop, well, we can simply win the pawn back with a nice space advantage here and a very pleasant position. But there is a trick here. I was trying to do a little trick for you there. What happens if you do take this pawn? What happens there? Can you see a trick? Uh-oh, well, bishop takes h3 would happen when there's a queen takes g2 checkmate idea. So first of all, a good move here is to either move your king, or even better, is queen to d3. And this sets a counter trick. That pawn's going to go on d4 at some point. But the counter trick now, which black could easily fall into, if he plays bishop takes h3, winning a pawn, threatening checkmate, we have the counter trick, knight to h4. This defends the checkmate, attacks the queen, and the reason we moved our queen to d3 is we can take the bishop next move, winning a piece. So all these lines after queen d3, I think this is black's best line, but white is doing absolutely fine, but still an aggressive position. And to be honest, that's all you really need to know in the Belgrade Gambit. So just to recap, we're going to have a look at other options black can play in this position very briefly in a second. But just to recap, after knight to f6, you first play this dashing move in the center with Derek the d-pawn. Derek the d-pawn comes flying out to d4. Now, if black recaptures on d4, our knight now dashes into the center. Against most moves, you simply want to win the pawn on d4 back. So this is your standard idea. Only against knight to b4 do you now take on f6 and develop castle, try to stop black's bishop coming out from c8 and win your pawn back on d4. And that's the Belgrade Gambit for you. Another spicy opening to add to your repertoire. Very quickly, what else can black play after the opening moves? e4, e5, knight to c3. What else can black play here? Well, a general rule here. If black plays a passive move, like d6, bishop to e7, something a little bit silly like this, then you should play d4 anyway. For example, let's say d6. This doesn't look very good because it traps the bishop on f8 in. Now d4. And after pawn takes d4, well, there's no need to jump into the center with our knight now. You can try it if you want to. It's probably not a bad move, but simply recapturing the pawn gives us a space advantage. We have free development and a nice edge here. Now, there's one very cute line here, which I have to show you because it's a really kind of piece of chess art, and that is with g6, where black is trying to stop you going d4. Now, what is the rule if black doesn't bring his knight on g8 out? What is the rule you should play here? d4, of course. Now, after d4, let's say black takes on d4. Well, again, knight takes d4 gives white a small advantage, but in this position, because black has played g6, which creates weaknesses on these highlighted squares, the dark squares, because he's put his pawns on light squares, therefore weakening the dark squares, we can now play in Belgrade Gambit fashion, knight to d5. And there's a little trick here. For example, if black is completely blind or still waking up, he might try something like knight to e7. Oh dear, knight to f6, checkmate, thank you very much. Now that is embarrassing. That's one trick. And what about something like bishop to g7? Was another devastating trick here, which Karyakin, the very strong player from Russia, once fell into. And that is bishop to g5. And we can see we're attacking on the dark squares. And now if knight to e7, black's trying to castle his king, we have the very strong move, knight takes d4. And in a blitz game, a speed game, Karyakin, once in a very similar position, now played bishop takes knight, thinking I've just won a piece. What is white's idea? Well, maybe you can tell me. What is white's devastating idea here? And it's a very pretty checkmate. Queen takes d4. What? Giving up the queen? Knight takes d4. Knight to f6 check. Black only has one square to go to. And now this very crafty checkmate. Bishop to h6, checkmate. Thank you very much. 10-move checkmate. So the simple rule is, against most of Black's main moves here, so if Black doesn't go knight to f6, you should go d4. When you can either take back on d4 if Black recaptures, or try the brave knight to d5 move. Now, one more little thing that a lot of beginners play here, bishop to c5. There is a standard trick against this move here. Maybe you know it, maybe you don't. The standard trick against this move is knight takes e5. And the idea, it looks like this loses a piece, but it doesn't actually lose a piece, because the knight takes e5, you now have this move d4, creating a fork in the center of the board. And in this position, White gains a very good initiative and advantage. Now, Black has also tried here, realizing that he's going to lose a piece back to d4, also tried bishop takes f2 in this position, which may look a little bit scary because you have to walk your king out only slightly, though. We're not going to go on a crazy mission to the North Pole with our king. That's too much. But Black doesn't have enough pieces attacking here, so our king is safe. For example, knight takes knight, and now pawn to d4. And we're kicking back the black pieces. The queen check somewhere doesn't help. We can just go g3 to block it. And if the knight retreats, we can do a technique here called castling by hand. And that is where we move our bishop, move our rook, and then move our king back. For example, bishop to c4, a great square for the bishop. The reason White is better here is because of his control of the center. Look at that lovely control. And now your next two moves is rook f1, king g1. And we've done this technique called castling by hand. And again, a very good position for White. And really, I'm not going to overcomplicate things. That is the Belgrade Gambit for you. So after e4, e5, my other two gambits in the spicy range can be seen in the library. But this knight to f3 move is my new discovery, with the idea of going for a 4 knights position and then punting away with d4 and knight to d5. And I really think you can have a lot of fun with this. A lot of good attacking ideas. And as the Rolling Stones say, it's only rock and roll. And this is what you got to do. This is spicy rock and roll chess. Give it a go. It'll be a lot of fun. Hopefully you need everything through these two videos. I'm sure you'll have some lovely wins if you try this idea. Thank you for watching. Please leave your comments below. I can't always answer the comments in the chat because there's a lot of comments. I don't always have time, but I do try to read them. Even if you hate the video, I don't mind. I got thick skin. You could tell me. And tell me what other videos you'd like to see me do in future, because I do listen to you and I do want to take your suggestions. And I know I haven't done a spicy opening for a while, so I thought we'd get back with a little spicy idea there. Thank you very much for viewing. Until next time.